When the NKVD accused Janusz Wisik of espionage and sabotage against the Soviet regime, he was arrested and tortured. He was then asked to sign a confession, but Janusz did not do so. Then the communists took over his wife. They forced her to denounce her husband for exile in Siberia. His wife slandered Janusz in his presence, after which she was released and he was sent to prison. He was sent to the Gulag camp for 20 years. Now around him, there was only snow, impenetrable forests, mountains, and several dozen unfortunate people like him. People here turned out to be no better than animals. And how could it be otherwise? Because they were kept in inhumane conditions. Only Janusz has remained compassionate and kind to this day. As he fed the prisoner his ration, the American, who called himself Mr. Smith, advised him not to do so again. People like Janusz will not be able to survive in the Gulag. But an actor named Khabarov appreciated Janusz's action. He immediately liked the new guy, and they became friends. Khabarov told how everything works here. He showed Janusz the real prisoners, among whom was a man named Valka. He was a gambler and even stabbed one of the prisoners to take his sweater. Human life in this place was not valued at all, so the prisoners lived as comfortably as possible. They were the masters here. To survive, some told stories and history lessons, others drew obscene pictures. This is how they paid for their safety and food. Janusz still had nothing to win the favor of the prisoners, but Khabarov helped him for free. When he was eaten by lice, he, on Khabarov's advice, buried his clothes in the snow. In the morning the biting insects left. They could not stand the cold. Khabarov said he couldn't wait to get out of here. He has a plan, and even gathers provisions to eat during his escape. The actor invites Janusz to join him. He readily agrees. After some time, the prisoners, returning from work, find themselves in a snowstorm. The guards order them to lie on the ground, but Smith realizes that this will freeze them all to death. He, despite the guards' prohibition, goes into the forest to hide from the wind. The soldier realizes that Smith is right and orders the others to hide behind the trees. Thanks to Smith's actions, the prisoners survive. However, later an American, Janusz, and several other people were sent to the mines. And this is certain death. Smith would have preferred to be shot. It would be faster. While working, Janusz begins to hallucinate. He discovers his home and follows it. But then it turns out that he is trying to leave the mine, but is stopped by a guard. Janusz then told Smith that he intended to run away with Khabarov. The American admitted that this actor would never be able to escape. He misleads newcomers to fuel their hopes of escape, to help him survive. He's like a leech. Despite Khabarov's meanness, Janusz still intended to escape, and he pulled the actor along with him. Only he admitted that he did not want to leave here. He's too scared. The wolf saw the two talking and decided to go with them. In addition to Vishchik, several other people decided to flee. They hid food so that there would be enough for the long journey. One of them was practically blind, but he was also accepted into the team. Valka also joined Janusz's group. He personally agreed with Vishchik to escape. Mr. Smith went too. He understood that he would not last long in the mines and that he had no other options for survival. They successfully left the camp, but thanks to the blizzard, tracking them down turned out to be problematic. Stopping to rest, Janusz decides to lead people to Lake Baikal. There they would be able to cross the border into Mongolia and leave the Soviet Union. However, determining the right direction is not so easy. The fugitives have been wandering around the taiga for a long time and are already beginning to lose hope. There is enough food for a week, and Valka suggests they start robbing the villagers if they make it to civilization. Only his idea does not find support. Smith prefers to fish instead. He makes a hook out of barbed wire. However, eating fish alone is also such a pleasure. Valka is not a penguin to eat so much fish. At the next stop, the fugitives go into the bushes and Janusz starts a fire. Kazik, who saw almost nothing, also goes to collect grass. However, in the taiga he gets lost and freezes. Having found him, the former prisoners buried him. With the onset of spring, escapees receive an additional source of food, worms, and larvae. The hungry wolf greedily attacks them because they have nothing else to eat. They live in a cave and eat whatever they find. One day, they see a pack of wolves tearing apart the carcass of an animal. The prisoners drive away the predators and pounce on the meat themselves. They had virtually no hope. Janusz decides to go on reconnaissance. If he finds Baikal, he will return and lead the others out. If he does not return, then Jurowski died in the taiga. And Janusz succeeds. Not to die, of course, but to find Baikal. Having come to his people, he says that it is 3 days' journey to Lake Baikal. The fugitives pack their things and hit the road. After some time, Smith notices the surveillance. It turns out that they're being followed by a man named Irina. She escaped from a collective farm, where the communists forcibly brought her and first killed her entire family. Noticing the escaped prisoners, she followed them because it was much better than living in her own house and eating regularly. The fugitives do not want to take her on the team, because she is an extra member and they themselves have nothing to eat. However, Irina continues to follow in their footsteps. One day they see a deer stuck in the mud. They kill it and eat it. At this moment, Irina joins them. Then they walk together. After a hearty dinner, the fugitives shave, cleanse themselves, get fresh clothes from somewhere, and hit the road again. In this form, they will not be mistaken for escaped prisoners and will not be handed over to the authorities for a reward. And Renee manages to get everyone in Janusz's group to talk. Men willingly tell her about themselves. And even Smith opened up. He said that he went to Russia with his son, as a result of which he was shot, and Smith ended up in the Gulag. Soon the group reached the village. The wolf offered to rob the locals, but the others refused. They may have been connected, so we need to be more careful. They returned to the forest, and Valka disappeared somewhere. In the evening, he returned with the spoils and fed everyone. When it became quite warm, clouds of mosquitoes appeared. They ate the fugitives alive. At the same time, mosquitoes do not bother local residents. Having learned how they managed to escape from the midges, the fugitives used village repellent. From that day on, their life became much easier and more enjoyable. After some time, the fugitives reached the border with Mongolia. Here Valka admits that he respects Comrade Stalin, which is why he tattooed his image on his chest. The border is guarded, but the prisoners find unpatrolled territory and cross to the other side. At the same time, Valka remains in her homeland. He has no intention of leaving the Soviet Union. She and Janusz part as friends. Once in Mongolia, the fugitives learn that the communists have reached this country, which means they can be arrested and sent back to Gulag. It was decided to go to India through the desert and mountains. On the way, they are surrounded by horsemen. They wonder who these people are and where they are going. Smith reveals that Irina is his daughter. The riders set off and later send a boy with water to the fugitives. He gives water to strangers so that they do not perish in the desert. Janusz determines where south is, and they go there. However, the water quickly runs out, and Smith suggests turning it off. It looks like there are trees on the other side. But Janusz thinks that this is a mirage. Despite his refusal, Smith leads the group towards the mirage. And it turns out that there really are trees and even a spring there. Having rested, washed, and taken water with them, the fugitives continue their journey. They see a sandstorm in front of them and hide from it. Soon they're overcome by thirst again, and their legs and knees become swollen. They carry her in their arms, but this doesn't help either. A young woman dies and is buried in the sand. Following her, Thomas goes to another world. He loved to draw, and after him only his sketches remained. After some time, the fugitives manage to find a mud puddle and quench their thirst. They also kill a snake to get enough food. Smith is exhausted and unable to continue, but Janusz drags him along. The American admits that his life is a punishment for bringing his son to Moscow. Janusz understands this because his wife is now punishing herself in the same way for turning her wife over to the NKVD. Janusz can't wait to return home and tell her that she is not to blame for anything. His story forces Smith to gather his strength and move forward. They discover water and then the Great Wall of China. Having crossed it, the fugitives reach Tibet. From there, Smith traveled to China to return to the United States. The rest continue on to India. They successfully cross the mountains and end up at a tea plantation. Here they are greeted by cheerful and friendly Indians. The villagers call a government representative, and when he arrives, it turns out that they are ready to accept strangers into the country without documents and without asking unnecessary questions. However, at the moment, Janusz is unable to return to his country and reunite with his wife. The war continued, but ended in May 1945. At the same time, the communists established their regime in Poland. In 1956, there was an uprising in Hungary. In 1961, the Berlin Wall was erected. 7 years later, Soviet troops entered Prague. In 1980, the Poles began to resist communism and brought their people to power. By the end of the decade, they managed to overthrow the communist regime. And all this time, Janusz could not return to his homeland. But now that his country was free and independent, he came to visit his wife. They were both outdated. However, Janusz still saw in her the young girl with whom he broke up many years ago.